So we'll jump into the Air Force right now and see what its plans are for FY14. And in the coming year, the Air Force requested a base budget of $114 billion, which is about a 3.5% increase from last year's request. This year, about 40% of the base budget is going to be spent on O&M, about a quarter will be spent on personnel, and about 17% will be spent on procurement. Now, Air Force's IT budget request for FY14 is also about a 4% increase from last year at $5.5 billion. Now, you'll notice that we've broken the IT budget down into two buckets over here, DME and SS, for those of you that aren't familiar with these terms. DME stands for Development, Modernization, and Enhancement. You might know that as CapEx money because traditionally it's been used for capital expenditures or new purchases. SS stands for Steady State. You might know Steady State as OpEx because it's traditionally been used for operations and maintenance purchases to kind of keep the lights on. Now, over the past few years, we've seen DoD sort of shift their buckets of money from DME into Steady State. But that being said, we are seeing about a 5% increase in Air Force DME funds for the year. So it's actually great to see an increase there. Now referencing this table at the bottom half of the slide, you'll notice a column labeled Primary BRM Service. Now, BRM stands for Business Reference Model, which describes the core function that an investment performs. Now, the reason that BRMs are important is because if the government's labeling an investment with, say, infrastructure, it might be important for a rep who sells infrastructure products to hunt in that particular program. Now, you can see that the IT infrastructure and maintenance BRM is by far the largest primary BRM within the Air Force, followed by command and control. In terms of addressable market within the Air Force, I've seen some estimates put it for IT at around $15.5 billion in FY14, with that addressable market for software products in about the $2 billion range. And forecasts for the products market will remain at about $2 billion over the next 4 or 5 years within the Air Force, so it's good to see some consistency there.
And these products are being purchased from a number of IT insertion points across the Air Force enterprise, and we'll cover some of the same offices we discussed last year at a high level because there have been so many personnel changes recently. We wanted to take a moment, though, and look into a couple of other components that haven't gotten quite as much attention in the past.
Starting with Air Force ISR. So Lieutenant General Bob Otto is the Deputy Chief of Staff for Air Force ISR at the Pentagon. Now, including blue, non-blue, and intel funds, he manages a $55 billion budget and 30,000 personnel across 5 directorates. Now, one of these directorates is the Air Force ISR Agency, providing applications, cyber resources, and other ISR products across the Air Force. Now, the ISR components within the Air Force are charged with collecting all real-time satellite data to improve our situational awareness in theater. Of course, once that data is collected, it has to be secured, tagged, managed, stored, accessed, and accessed from a common operating environment. So when I hear customers talk about this type of thing, my ears perk up because I think about all the opportunities that our clients have to sell into this space. So anybody selling applications related to GIS or middleware, BI or analytics, of course storage, virtualization, or systems development companies are going to find opportunities to influence requirements coming out of these ISR offices here. Now, unfortunately, one of the problems that the Air Force keeps running into is that they just don't have adequate acquisition capabilities to deliver on the ISR solutions that they need. I was talking to Major General Ed Wilson, Director of Air Force Space Operations, and he said that Air Force really needs serious reform on its acquisition standards because buying these types of products has just been way too slow and completely ineffective. Now, I assume this will be one of the topics that they address at the Air Force ISR Industry Day. That's coming up next Thursday, October 31st in Springfield, Virginia. You can check AVCIA's events page for more information on that event. Now, one component that we did cover last year, of course, was the Information Dominance A6 Office of the Air Force. I did talk to General Baslow, who's, of course, their CIO, a couple of months back. And I can tell you that his major concerns are pretty much the same as any other 6. Increasing savings through common standards, leveraging open architecture, strategic sourcing, and more heavily leveraging shared services. Now, over the next 18 months, Air Force will facilitate common hosting standards for all non-weapon systems, and they're currently working on an aerial internet platform so planes can share more information with each other from the air, again, leveraging common platforms and hosting standards. Now, all of these efforts are steps towards realizing the JIE.
And the Air Force would not be equipped to carry out these initiatives without Air Force Materiel Command, located at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Materiel Command is headed by General Janet Wolfenbarger, and it consists of 5 centers and 21 staff directorates. And one of those directorates is the Lifecycle Management Center. Here's a look at the Lifecycle Management Center, also based at Wright-Patt. This center, as its name would suggest, leads a lifecycle management mission, including acquisition and support technology. The LCMC manages 450 investment programs and 500 sustainment programs. As you can see, there are 10 PEOs, including Battle Management, C3INN, and BES.
And we will cover a few of those PEOs today just because they do deserve some attention. And PEO C3INN is probably the most exciting one because anything related to Air Force infrastructure runs here. Anything related to JIE implementation is run out of here. Everything that they do is with the JIE in mind so that the Air Force won't have a huge need to change anything when JIE standards become mandatory. Now, there have been several organizational changes at C3INN, including the consolidation of the Crypto Systems Division into the Responsive Cyber Division under Colonel Chris Kinney. The AFNet infrastructure work is now falling under Mike Kaplan in the C3I infrastructure branch. And the GCSS branch is now under the Commoditized Infrastructure branch headed by Mike Clark. Also, the Architecture and Standards Division was consolidated into the Infrastructure Division this year under Colonel Bill Polakowski. And Colonel Polakowski and I discussed a couple of weeks ago the Air Force's plan to reduce data centers from the existing 520 down to 345. Their plan is to begin shifting focus to 5 medium-sized data centers called Area Processing Centers, or APCs. And these APCs will be located at 5 strategic locations: Andrews Air Force Base, McConnell, McGee-Tyson, Scott, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So it's important to note those locations.
The second PEO of note is Battle Management up at Hanscom. PEO Battle Management is now run by Steve Wart and is responsible for mission planning, theater C4, strategic surveillance, and intelligence. So anything that has to do with aerospace management, precision engagement, or communications and controls weapon systems would be developed and acquired through this office. PEO BM runs 311 major and non-major programs like the Mission Planning System, TBMCS, and the Air Force Weather Weapon System.
And the last significant PEO of note is Business Enterprise Systems, which delivers contracting and program management for 128 programs. It's got an annual budget of about $1 billion and employs around 2,300 people out at Maxwell Air Force Base. Now, their focus is on logistics and business sustainment, enterprise operations, enterprise services and operations. And their main effort this year is going to be on improving infrastructure modernization through programs like DEAMS and AFIPS. So anybody selling products related to BPM, PLM, ERP, AppDev, and SOA would do well to attack opportunities out of BES.
Now, we spent a fair amount of time diving into SpaceCom last year, so we won't spend too much time here. It's just important to note that this MAGCOM, located at Peterson Air Force Base and commanded by General William Shelton, delivers space and cyberspace capabilities to the Joint Warfighting Team. SpaceCom employs over 42,000 people in 134 locations worldwide. And Brigadier General Kevin Wooten, runs SpaceCom's A6, and he manages an $11.4 billion space and cyberspace portfolio. They also work with the 14th and 24th Air Forces to support Cybercom and STRATCOM. And speaking of the 24th Air Force, there have been some major changes this year, so we'll cover those briefly. So as you all know, the 24th Air Force, or AFCyber, is the operational warfighting organization that defends Air Force's networks and protects U.S. interests in cyberspace. Of course, AFCyber was supposed to become a major command, but in 2008, the 24th was given responsibility of the cyber warfare mission. They employ over 5,400 people, and they're based out of Lackland Air Force Base. And as I mentioned previously, there have been several changes at the 24th this year, so I'll run through them quickly. Major General Kevin McLaughlin replaced Major General Suzanne Vautrinot as commander of the 24th in June. Lieutenant Colonel Eric DeLonge replaced Colonel Cynthia Wright at the 38th. Lieutenant Colonel Bradley Pyburn replaced Colonel Alan Berry at the 624th in July. And the 689th Combat Comms Wing at Robbins and the 3rd Combat Comms Group at Tinker were both deactivated in September, which left the 5th Combat Comms Group to take over control of all combat communications, and the 5th is now a direct reporting unit to the 24th. Now, AFCyber has been pushing Air Force leaders to allocate more funds to cyber operations. In order to maintain effectiveness and superiority, more investment in this space will be required. So I think it goes without saying that if you're selling infrastructure and cybersecurity related products, Spacecom and AFCyber are the components you'll want to focus on to influence requirements and secure funding.
And now we'll move on to some of the contracts that the Air Force prefers to leverage for its acquisitions. Now, you'll notice that on all the contracts and contractor slides, we're referencing FY12 numbers. The reason for that is due to the reporting delay that DoD has in reporting its acquisitions. So that makes the FY13 data incomplete. So we wanted to give you a full year picture of their spending. So the Air Force does obligate between $65 and $70 billion on contracts a year, and the agency uses a wide variety of them. You can see here that NetSense is leveraged for about $1.8 billion a year, and GSA Schedule 70 leveraged for about $500 million. But these two vehicles combined only account for a little over 3% of total Air Force contract spending. Now, like other DoD agencies, Air Force is heavily leveraging BPAs off of initiatives like the Enterprise Software Initiative, or ESI, for which immixGroup has been the leading vendor over the past 4 years. And referencing back to NetSense, of course, we're all aware of the many delays that have plagued this contract vehicle over the last several years. But we are happy to say that immixGroup was one of the 16 awardees on the NetSense 2 products contract. Now, there have been more protests, but we're optimistic that the Air Force will take corrective action soon so that it'll be open for business in the next few months. Clients and partners, stay tuned for details from our programs team as we roll out this vehicle. Now, one other contract vehicle of note for the Air Force is the CSTATS vehicle. That stands for Cyber Security and Information Systems Technical Areas Tasks, CSTATS. Now, it'll be a 5-year MAC with a $2 billion ceiling that'll buy software and services related to information assurance, network security, and modeling and simulation. A draft RFP is expected this winter with an award expected in the spring of 2015, so keep your eyes peeled for CSTATS. Now, here's a glimpse of the Air Force top contractors. You can see that the F-35 and the F-22 programs have benefited Lockheed and Boeing enormously because those two companies combined have earned more revenue over the past 3 years than the next 18 companies combined. Now, these companies may offer teaming opportunities for product manufacturers so you can take advantage of their relationships and or contract vehicles.
Now let's discuss some of the major challenges and initiatives that the Air Force is facing this year that will drive the purchase of more hardware and software. The Air Force has linked many of its major investments with strategic priorities like strengthening the nuclear enterprise, building networks that ensure data safety and data sharing, and increasing funding for cybersecurity and C2 capabilities. Additional funding increases are going to benefit struggling ERP and management systems, as well as modernization of tactical communication infrastructure. One of the most relevant funding increases will benefit software manufacturers because the Air Force needs help replacing antiquated or malfunctioning network infrastructure and security programs and equipment. Also, the Air Force's budget request for the year calls out the need to leverage more COTS products and COTS technologies for IT programs, quote, to reduce time and development expenses incurred when acquiring new services. Of course, we can't talk about DoD drivers without mentioning cost cutting. So the Air Force is taking measures to limit spending and increase return on investment by leveraging partnerships with Army and DISA. Just this August, DISA reached an agreement with Army and Air Force to improve network bandwidth and security while realizing $1.2 billion in cost avoidance. Additionally, the Army has made an investment into the consolidation of hundreds of network security stacks and boiled them down to 15 regional security stacks, which the Air Force will also be leveraging to increase network speeds and improve enterprise capabilities.
So we've taken a look at some of the budgets, we've taken a look at some of the organizations and the drivers that are affecting IT procurement, so now let's take a look at some of the investments that the Air Force will be making this year, starting with DEAMS. DEAMS is one of the Air Force's 2 major ERPs run out of PEO BES. Of course, AFIPS is the other major ERP, which is run by Program Manager Tom Davenport. But where AFIPS is the continuation of the old DIMERS program that provides integrated personnel and pay records for the Air Force, DEAMS is actually a financial system that leverages COTS software to replace legacy systems. Now, Transcom, DFAS, and Air Force will use DEAMS to provide consolidated bills, command budget prep and execution, and accurate financial statements. Now, there has been some controversy over DEAMS over the past few years because operational assessments of the program concluded that DEAMS is, quote, neither operationally effective nor operationally suitable, neither making sufficient progress towards achieving audit readiness nor towards achieving full financial auditability. Ouch. But thus far, the system is operational at Scott and McConnell Air Force bases and DFAS centers in Maine and Ohio. Now, the plan for DEAMS is to achieve audit readiness and to be deployed worldwide by 2016. So that's really the primary need that COTS manufacturers can address here. How can you help them to achieve audit readiness? How can you help them to consolidate legacy systems, integrate, manage, and secure data, and help them re-engineer business processes and find accurate reporting capabilities? Those are the solutions that Shirley Reed and Pat Hagan really want to hear about.
Now, switching gears to a more infrastructure-heavy investment, the Base Information Infrastructure Program supports the AFNet and Information Transport System through hardware and software maintenance and repair, as well as software license agreements, as well as network security. In the past year, BII replaced network infrastructure components at Lackland, MacDill, Laughlin, Cannon, and Ilsen Air Force bases. Efforts continue at Dyess and Massawa Air Force bases, and 3 more locations have been prioritized for FY14 that, for the time being, are being undisclosed. As Tim mentioned earlier, these types of infrastructure investments are all being run out of PEO's C3INN up at Hanscom. So setting meetings with Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Krolikowski in the Base Infrastructure Branch of the C3I Infrastructure Division will be easier if you're on point with your messaging around SIM and network security, data and information management, and network consolidation and modernization.
And then the final Air Force investment we'll cover today is the Tactical Data Links program. Also run out of PEO C3INN. Tactical Data Links facilitates the exchange of messages, radar target information, satellite imagery, and data. The purpose of the investment is to improve global connectivity and interoperability. We're starting to see a trend here. So this isn't the only Air Force investments that's designed to improve information and collection and dissemination, though. Investments like GCSS and the GBS programs are similar to Tactical Data Links in that they provide combat support, information and video transmission. They transmit imagery and other large data files in support of joint military forces, and as we all know, joint efforts is where the DoD is headed. But in any case, the Tactical Data Links program has over $30 million in DME funds this year and will see a focus on upgrading digital network communications between older aircraft with newer aircraft, so older aircraft like the F-15 and F-16 with newer aircraft like the F-22 and F-35. So this program is overseen by Stan Newberry, who's actually an SESer out at Langley Eustis at the Air Force C2 Integration Center. And on a side note, I talked to Brigadier General Brian Kiloff at an FC event a couple of weeks ago, and he said that everybody at the Pentagon, as well as those program folks down at Langley, are invested in this type of warfighting integration platform. So funding for these types of programs are going to remain relatively safe for the year.